Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses, and this is Compagnonage from the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry by Albert G. Mackey. Compagnonage. This is the name which is given in France to certain mystical associations formed between workmen of the same or analogous handicraft, whose object is to afford mutual assistance to members. It was at one time considered among handicraftsmen as the second degree of the novitiate before arriving at the maîtrise, or mastership, the first being, of course, that of apprentice, and workmen were admitted into it only after 5 years of apprenticeship, and on the production of a skillfully constructed piece of work, which is called their chef-d'œuvre. Tradition gives to Compagnonage a Hebraic origin, which to some extent assimilates it to the traditional history of Freemasonry as springing out of the Solomonic Temple. It is, however, certain that it arose in the 12th century out of a part of the corporation of workmen. These, who prosecuted the labors of their craft from province to province, could not shut their eyes to the narrow policies of the guilds or corporations, which the masters were constantly seeking to make more exclusive. Thence they perceived the necessity of forming for themselves associations or confraternities, whose protection should accompany them in all their laborious wanderings, and secure to them employment and fraternal intercourse when arriving in strange towns. The Compagnons de l'Auteur, which is the title assumed by those who are the members of the Brotherhoods of Compagnonage, have legends which have been traditionally transmitted from age to age, by which, like the Freemasons, they trace the origin of their association to the temple of King Solomon. These legends are 3 in number, for the different societies of Compagnonage recognize 3 different founders, and hence made 3 different associations, which are 1. The Children of Solomon, 2. The Children of Maître Jacques, 3. The Children of Parasubis. These 3 societies or classes of Compagnons are unreconcilable enemies, and reproach each other with the imaginary contest of their supposed founders. The Children of Solomon pretended that King Solomon gave them their Devar guild as a reward for their labors at the temple, and that he had there united them into a brotherhood. The Children of Maître Jacques said that their founder, who was the son of the celebrated architect named Joachim or Jacques, was one of the chief masters of Solomon, and a colleague of Hiram. He was born in a small city of Gaul, now Caught, and now Saint Romil, but which we should in vain look for on the maps. From the age of 15, he was employed in stone cutting. He traveled in Greece, where he learned sculpture and architecture. Afterward went to Egypt, and thence to Jerusalem, where he constructed 2 pillars with so much skill that he was immediately received as a master of the craft. Maître Jacques and his colleague Parasubis, after the labors of the temple were completed, resolved to go together to Gaul, swearing that they would never separate. But the union did not last very long in consequence of the jealousy excited in Parasubis by the ascendancy of Maître Jacques over their disciples. They parted, and the former landed at Bordeaux, and the latter at Marseille. One day Maître Jacques, being far away from his disciples, was attacked by 10 of those of Parasubis. To save himself, he fled into a marsh, where he sustained himself from sinking by holding on to the reeds, and was eventually rescued by his disciples. He then retired to Saint Boom, but being soon after betrayed by a disciple named, according to some, Geron, and according to others, Genet, he was assassinated by 5 blows of a dagger in the 47th year of his age, 4 years and 9 days after his departure from Jerusalem. On his robe was subsequently found a reed which he wore in memory of his having been saved in the marsh, and thenceforth his disciples adopted the reed as the emblem of their order. Parasubis is not generally accused of having taken any part in the assassination. The tears which he shed over the tomb of his colleague removed in part the suspicions which had at first rested on him. The traitor who committed the crime, subsequently, in a moment of deep contrition, cast himself into a well, which the disciples of Maître Jacques filled up with stones. The relics of the martyr were long preserved in a sacred chest, and when his disciples afterward separated into different crafts, his hat was given to the hatters, his tunic to the stonecutters, his sandals to the locksmiths, his mantle to the jointers, his girdle to the carpenters, and his staff to the cartwrights. According to another tradition, Maître Jacques was no other than Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Templars, who had collected under his banner some of the children of Solomon that had separated from the parent society, and who, about 1268, conferred upon them a new devoir or guild. Parasubies is said, in the same legend, to have been a Benedictine monk who gave to the carpenters some special statutes. This second legend is generally recognized as more true than the first. From this, it follows that the division of the society of Compagnonage into three classes dates from the 13th century, and that the children of Maître Jacques and of Parasubies are more modern than the children of Solomon, from whom they were dismemberment. The organization of these societies of Compagnonage remains one very strongly of the somewhat similar organization of the stonemasons of Germany and of the other countries in the Middle Ages. To one of these classes, every handicraftsman in France was expected to attach himself. There was an initiation and a system of degrees which were four in number: the accepted companion, the finished companion, the initiated companion, and lastly, the affiliated companion. There were also signs and words as modes of recognition and decorations, which varied in the different devoirs, but to all, the square and compasses was a common symbol. As soon as a craftsman had passed through his apprenticeship, he joined one of the three guilds and commenced his journey over France, which was called the Tour de France, in the course of which he visited the principal cities, towns, and villages, stopping for a time whenever he could secure employment. In almost every town there was a house of call, presided over always by a woman, who was affectionately called La Mère, or the Mother, and the same name was given to the house itself. There the Compagnons held their meetings and annually selected their officers, and traveling workmen repaired there to obtain food and lodging, and the necessary information which might lead to employment. When two companions meet on the road, one of them addressed the other with the topage or challenge, being a formula of words, the conventional reply to which would indicate that the other was a member of the same devoir. If such was the case, friendly greetings ensued, but if the reply was not satisfactory, and it appeared that they belonged to different associations, a war of words, and even of blows was the result. Such was formerly the custom, but through the evangelistic labors of Agricole Perry, a journeyman joiner of Avignon, who traveled through France inculcating lessons of brotherly love, a better spirit now exists. In each locality, the association has a chief, who is annually elected by ballot at the General Assembly of the craft. He is called the first Compagnon of Dignity. He presides over the meetings, which ordinarily take place on the first Sunday of every month, and represents the society in its intercourse with other bodies, with the masters, or with the municipal authorities. Compagnonage has been exposed at various periods to the persecutions of the church and the state, as well as to the opposition of the corporations of masters, to which, of course, its designs were antagonistic because it opposed their monopoly. Unlike them, and particularly the Corporation of Freemasons, it was not under the protection of the church. The practice of its mystical receptions were condemned by the Faculty of Theology at Paris in 1655 as impious. But 100 years before, in 1541, a decree of Francis I had interdicted the Compagnons de la Tour from binding themselves by an oath, from wearing swords or canes, from assembling in a greater number than 5 outside of their masters' houses, or from having banquets on any occasion. During the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, the parliaments were continually interposing their power against the associations of Compagnonage, as well as against other fraternities. The effects of these persecutions although embarrassing, were not absolutely disastrous. In spite of them, Compagnonage was never entirely dissolved, although a few of the traders abandoned their devoirs, some of which, however, such as that of the shoemakers, were subsequently renewed. And at this day, the guilds of the workmen still exist in France, having lost, it is true, much of their original code of religious dogmas and symbols, and although not recognized by the law, also tolerated by the municipal authorities and undisturbed by the police. To the Masonic scholar, the history of these devoirs or guilds is peculiarly interesting. In nearly all of them, the Temple of Solomon prevails as a predominant symbol, while the square and compass, their favorite and constant device, would seem in some way to identify them with Freemasonry so far as respects the probability of a common origin. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.